Thank you. Thanks very much to you all again for coming out. I think this must be maybe our fourth, fifth stakeholders evening. So fifth. Thanks very much for coming. We'll start off with some introductions, and I'll give a brief intro, and then you're going to hear from quite a lot of the team. I'm going to be doing less talking than normal tonight, so you'll probably be pleased to hear that. I'll introduce the team, starting over there with our slide projector man, Andy Sharp, and he's a senior project manager at Grosvenor. I'll just run through the team and then over to my right here, Chris White. Chris White is a director at Renbridge, our joint venture partner on this project. Richard Arnold, next along, is a sports director at Renbridge. I'm Ed Skeets, I'm a projects director at Grosvenor. On my left here, your right, is a new face to the team, and we're very pleased to welcome here, but he's no new face to Cambridge. This is Alex Robinson. Alex is the Senior Development Manager on this project now going forward, and Alex is currently building a new home for the Cambridge and Peterborough Fire Service a few miles down the road on Parker's Piece. So he's well, not quite on Parker's Piece, next to Parker's Piece. we try. The home of the modern day of football, as you all will know. And then along from Alex is Brian Plum from WSP. Alex is a director and deals with our transport planning, which we'll hear more about this evening. And then last but not least, Colin Campbell, a devoted Cambridge United fan and planner from Savills, and we'll hear a fair bit about the planning tonight. So I'm just going to give a short introduction, and I think I can't not mention 2012 and sort of what a fantastic springboard this summer has been for a project like this. Cambridge has brought a handful of medals, which is fantastic. 2012 we've all seen on the telly, and some of us have experienced fantastic facilities, and that's obviously something we're striving for here. And also, despite horror stories, a fantastic transport system that got people to and from those games without any difficulties. So it's been a real good launch, I think, and given us a target to get our application in. And the plan is to get it in either later this year, 2012, or early next year, and we're on target for that. There's one thing in particular I wanted to give as a message tonight, and I'll say it a number of times, I think, which is how you can help us on this project if you support it, and that is with the public consultation that's going to be ongoing. And currently there is consultation for South Cambridgeshire District Council's plan. Colin will say a bit more about that, but there is an opportunity to comment on the community stadium, comment on our plans for a community stadium, and have your voice heard. It is important. If ever there was a time for local opinion to be given, it's now. The planning system and the politicians all want to hear from us. So we're going to hear tonight about how the scheme is evolving. You've seen some things before, you're going to see some new things tonight. You're going to hear about the business case for this, you're going to hear about the new jobs that we're bringing, the new sports facilities that are coming in, the new types of sports which are coming on, and you're going to hear about how we're going to make this a great place to live, to work, to play, and for generally to be healthy. We might have erroneously said that this was the last chance to comment on the plans. This won't be the last chance to comment on the plans. There's still going to be a bit more consultation before the application actually goes in, and of course when the application is in there'll be the chance to comment. But we really appreciate you all coming along tonight. We're going to tell you about the project so far and open for questions. So I'm going to hand over Andy. We'll flip through a couple of slides there, but I'm going to hand over to Chris now, who's going to take you through that.
Hi, I'll stand up. Just to remind everybody where this site is, which I think everyone's pretty familiar with now, but we're junction 11 of the M11. You can see Trumpington Meadows in the bottom left-hand corner. To the far right is Addenbrooks, which obviously is going through enormous extension at the moment. Then there's Clay's Farm and Glebe Farm, which together are about 300 new houses coming through in the Cambridgeshire Southern Fringe. Then there's Trumpington Meadows, the existing Trumpington Meadows, wrapping round the park and ride, which is a further 1,200 homes. You can see there the guided bus route from Trumpington Meadows up and north, and you can also faintly see the new Addenbrooke's Relief Road, which comes off the Hawkston Road directly onto the M11, and see the transport infrastructure. Just the bottom left, and I'll come on to it in a bit more detail, obviously, is the Sporting Village site. It's a bit of a poor quality, but just to show you the old master plan, just to show you the context of Trumpington Meadows. I'm sorry, this isn't very clear, but right to the top north-hand side, you can see the Waitrose. The residential wrapping round the park and ride is what Barrett's are currently building. So when you go down to Trumpington Meadows now, you'll see a lot of development on site. I believe the first residents are actually living in Trumpington Meadows now. So that's the first development in the Southern Fringe to come through, which actually has residents living there. So what I'm going to talk you through now is just the current master plan of how it looks. Firstly, just looking at the topography of the site, you can see that it's very unclear, I'm afraid, but the red line, it's just unclear. So that red line there is the Hawkston Road. This is essentially the Addenbrooke's Relief Road. So you can see the topography of the site slopes away this way. This is actually a cycleway over the M11. So one of the objectives of the master plan is just to look at these contours and work out how best can you get views and interaction of the sporting village with the residential and the actual buildings forming the stadium themselves. I'll show you this slide purely to look at how we've looked at the lines of access through the site. One of the key things is this area here, which is called Shepherd's Cottage, which is now a disused building at Trumpington Meadows, but it does carry significant weight and historical relevance for locals. Our existing master plan sort of ignored Shepherd's Cottage in entirety, so we've redesigned the master plan to take account of the Shepherd's Cottage. The other thing is looking at the lines of access through the site. This is the park and ride, and we've used Shepherd's Cottage as a sort of central point to create lines of access north to south and east to west, and looking at better ways to integrate the sports stadium and the sporting village with the residential. So this is the current master plan as it stands at the moment. The line here is the current consented Trumpington Meadows, so just sort of slightly faint pink is the current Trumpington Meadows. This area here is the new 400 homes, which essentially, together with a receipt from the Abbey Stadium site, funds the construction of the new stadium. One of the things which is absolutely critical is obviously this gateway in here. So when you come off the M11, turn left into Hawkston Road, the first thing you're going to see is the stadium and the sporting village. So we're doing a lot of work around this elevation to ensure that what you see is pretty spectacular and unique. I won't talk about the actual stadium itself too much because Richard's going to give you a bit more information on sort of match day experience and actual sort of layout of the stadium. Suffice to say that our conversations with Anglia Ruskin University, Core Cambridge, restaurants, conference facilities have all progressed to the next stage. They're all fully on board, and what we're actually going to be building here should be a heavily used facility 7 days of the week, 365 days of the year. It won't be a venue which people go to watch a football game every other week during the football season. In terms of this area here, these are the sporting facilities, the outdoor sporting facilities we're looking to provide. And just taking you through very quickly, this is a five-a-side centre, this is small-sided soccer, this is a full-size 3G AstroTurf pitch, these are two hockey pitches, and this is a grass pitch. What we're really keen to make sure is this is not just a venue for football, it has to be multi-sports, otherwise we're not going to get the support of the local authorities. We're pleased to say we've got some really good progressive dialogue with Cambridge City Hockey Club and Cambridge Nomads Hockey Club about this becoming their new home. That, particularly Cambridge City, would bring a whole new dynamic to the sporting village. They have about 10 adult teams, they have about 300 youth players every week playing hockey. They complement the football really, really well, and also would give us exposure to a whole load of new support for the sporting village concept. So the FA are heavily involved and would administer the running of the small-sided soccer, the five-a-side and the AstroTurf pitch. And they would also manage the hockey pitches outside the usage of the hockey clubs I've just mentioned. The other key thing is this area here, which I won't go into too much detail, but this is the indoor 3G sports hall a really unique sort of building. There won't be anything like this in the region. It can be used for the first team at Cambridge United in the winter when the pitches are frozen. But I think this will be really, really heavily used, particularly by schools, throughout the whole year. It'll be quite a special place to go and train and play football. So just talking briefly about the business case, I think the model we've got here is pretty unique for the UK. This model is used throughout Europe, but not in this country. Normally new stadiums are funded by either local authorities or often by food store development, which is not the case here. The land itself will continue to be owned by a freeholder. That will likely be Grosvenor in the short term because someone's got to sit and hold this for a while until the business plan's up and running. Then overarching the whole agreement will be a stadium management company. And I could put here the various users who I've just sort of previously touched on. All those users will have a stake at the table for the stadium management company. Some of these organisations, and the football club is one of them, will be paying a rent. Some of them, such as the Youth and Community Trust, won't be paying a rent. We've got dialogue with all these end users. Heads of terms are out for discussion. We've got ongoing meetings at the moment. The other thing I think I failed to mention is part of this mix is a 500 facility conference venue, which puts a lot of revenue back into the project. There will also be a lot of ancillary commercial development outside the scope of Anglia Ruskin in the form of cafes, some offices and some retail offering. And I said before, the FA will manage these facilities, the actual sports playing facilities, on a non-profit making basis. So the whole idea is, in terms of revenue, this business case has been developed over about 5 months, a lot of input from the football club, and this, in terms of pure revenue, this model is self-sustaining. The revenue generated and the rent paid by various end users, the revenue generated from all the sports facilities and their usage, essentially covers the running costs and creates a really good sinking fund towards the facilities within the sporting village. What we're looking to take away from the football club and other end users is things which they may not want to focus their attentions on. Things like marketing, financial management, insurance of buildings, repair and maintenance of buildings, payment of rates, utilities. That's all taken away from the end users. That's managed by the stadium management company, and for that the club's paying all in rent. They can focus on what they're really good at, generating match day revenue and making a successful football club. Apparently. I'm going to hand over to Richard now, who's going to focus more on the stadium.
Thanks, Chris. Okay, starting with the overall orientation of the sporting village. The stadium sits here, self-explanatory. As Chris touched upon, the indoor hall in this location with parking both for match day and non-match day, and also opening up to be quite an active square for the non-match day scenario. Just briefly talking about the indoor hall before we focus on the stadium. It's been sized such that it is suitable for the club's youth system to progress to full academy status, so fantastic for the youth system there. And then all of the changing room accommodation around it then also suits the outdoor pitches, so it becomes the hub for both the outdoor and the indoor. It will be run by CAMS FA in association with the Youth and Community Trust. Turning the focus back to the stadium, we're effectively at ground floor level. So in terms of the overall stadium, there is a series of concourses all the way round. The brown donates refreshment kiosks, be that beer or food, and the blues toilets. So effectively, anywhere within the stadium where you're sat or standing, there's a good provision of both refreshment and toilets. Turning to the rest of the accommodation, most of the club's activities happen here in the West Stand. So the main entrance is just here. To the left of the main entrance, you have the club shop, the club offices, ticket office, all combined. And then to the right, you have all of the players' areas, so changing rooms, medical areas, referees' rooms, all of the match day activities. And then in the north and stretching around to the northwest corner is where we start to see some of the other uses of the sporting village. So you've got part of Anglia Ruskin University's accommodation there, and then in the north there, that green denotes Core Cambridge, which is effectively a sports rehabilitation centre. So this is a really active area in front of that square. If very briefly, we've got a small little mezzanine level above the ground floor accommodation. That's for media, so that they have their own dedicated facilities, but very much in keeping with the ethos of this being a hard-working stadium and venue. On a non-match day, that doubles up as classroom space for the Youth and Community Trust, so they have their own IT facilities and classroom area there. Moving up to the first floor level, and this is where on a match day will be all of the club hospitality facilities. So you've got the main restaurant and hospitality area there, taking 300 covers on a match day, all with pitch side views. So a real opportunity to create revenue, boardroom, some executive boxes, and further lounge space there. So that will be a really key part of the overall club's match day experience. And then that will also then form on a non-match day things like the conference area that Chris alluded to earlier in the presentation. Moving on round, that space here is Anglian Ruskin University, so that's where they have classrooms. It is specifically their sports science department, so they've also got various different labs for all of the different science work that they do there. And then moving round, we've got space there for what might be a gym or various other things that we're talking about, be that a medical practice, but that's still under some development. We've done quite a lot of work in terms of how the overall stadium structure works. I think probably the biggest factor has been we've now sunk the pitch down just over a metre and a half. The main benefit that brings is that on a match day, you're effectively arriving at a raised level on the stadium. If you've been to other stadiums, you'll have experienced that, where you're effectively coming halfway through the seating stand. It also has advantages for disabled supporters because they are coming in at ground floor level, but getting a raised profile above the pitch. So that will help with the overall atmosphere. Thanks, Andy. And you can see here the work we've done there. So various different disabled positions around those two stands. We've spoken to you before about incorporating both standing and seating. The north stand is still very much intended to be the home terraced area with seating on both sides. I guess the major development is that the south stand is now likely to be all-seater for away fans. That's really come out through discussions and developments with the safety advisor group and the different representatives from the police in terms of just managing away fans, because you have to give them a combination of terracing or seating or just seating, so it's much easier just to manage them in one stand. So that was the main discussion point there. I think as well the other point to note with the atmosphere is whilst you've got 4 individual stands, the whole thing is enclosed by a single roof, so it will still have that feel of an enclosed bowl stadium. So the atmosphere will be retained within the ground. And finally, a couple of images to show you, and as Chris alluded to, this gateway for coming in from the M11. And really what we're working towards is trying to create quite a landmark feature, looking at how we might be innovative with some of the materials that we use, looking at timber, but also looking at how that's coloured. So the architects are looking at having a combination of almost burnt timber, so it's very much the black, and then different dyes to bring in the amber. So you can actually bring in quite cleverly the club colours without making it too obvious with metal cladding. And then you can see here, this is the active square we talked about, and the different accommodation with the university. Again, bringing a different dimension depending on where you are in the stadium. And then finally, an artist's impression, really sort of like encapsulating what I was talking about earlier, that you've got with the roof going all the way around, very much an enclosed bowl, so it should be a really contained and great atmosphere in the stadium. That's it for the plan, so I'm now going to pass you over to Brian, who will talk to you a little bit about transport.
Good evening, everyone. Richard and Chris are talking about the various uses that are on there, Anglian Ruskin University and core facilities. So we've been looking at the transport associated with that, because there's different issues to deal with the transport on a daily basis. There's 400 houses there to deal with. There's the daily operation of the site. So looking at how the site links in terms of transport with the road network around it, how it links with the sort of transport hub and the buses into the city centre and the like. So on a daily basis, we're doing various assessments at the moment, looking at how we deal with those transport issues. Obviously, there's weekday fixtures in the evening, and that's another aspect of the development we need to look at and see how that operates and works. Specifically here, what we're showing here is the weekend fixture and how there's the pedestrian routes between the sort of transport hub and an extension of the park and ride facilities, which could provide up to an additional 400 parking spaces in there associated with the sporting village, and that's sort of about a 350-metre walk from the stadium into the transport hub, into the parking facilities, and then onto the public transport facilities, which can link to the city centre, either by the park and ride buses or by the guided busway into the city centre. On the match days, on the weekend match days, what we're looking at is restricting access at the main Hawkston Junction into the site, looking at making sure that there's no vehicular interplay between the existing and extended residential areas into the stadium area, so that there's no vehicular traffic crossing over this area, and so it's a very pedestrian friendly walk from this sort of transport hub into the stadium. As Richard said, there is some parking around the stadium, and that will be controlled in terms of the use of that parking on match days. Also, we've been looking at providing a lay-by, a set-down coach parking area for away supporters, and that will allow the away supporters to be dropped off on the Hawkston Road, and then a dedicated pedestrian route to be taken into that south stand area. So there's a separation of the away supporters from yourselves. And then obviously beyond that, what we're looking at is the issue of parking beyond this area, which I'm familiar was an issue last time we talked about this, and this is an ongoing process. And if we look at the next slide, what we're currently looking at is areas which are away. This is the sort of stadium area in here. Areas which are sort of up to a sort of half an hour walk away from the stadium along various routes, and this is an ongoing process. So something that we're currently looking at into the detail of to establish more parking away from the ground. I'll pass over there.
Thanks, Brian. Good evening. Just say a few words about planning. I think the lesson from tonight is you should use PowerPoint rather than printing to PDF, because quite a few of the slides haven't come out. Run through planning. I thought perhaps first I ought to say a few words about the planning system, just so people understand the system in which we operate. The UK has a plan-led system, so that means each local authority needs to have a local plan in place, and that sets out the policies by which they'll judge development, and it makes allocations of land for different forms of development, say for residential, for retailing, and so on. Cambridge City and South Cambs both adopted local plans around 5 or 6 years ago, and they are both in the process of reviewing their plans. Current plans make provision for development to 2016, and now they're rolling those forward to 2031. Quite a task. The City Council has recently consulted on issues and options, so that paper identified a series of questions for people to respond to, including 8 questions in relation to the community stadium. I can't remember how many questions overall, but there are questions about the level of housing in the future and all sorts of things. And in total they had 11,000 comments submitted, not all on the stadium issues, but 11,000 overall. So quite a task for officers to analyse those, which they're currently doing. On the back of that, there will then be a further consultation on sites that the City Council thinks should come forward for development. That will happen early next year. There will then be a draft plan in the summer, and the City Council currently is aiming for adoption around April 2014. So not a short process in order to move a plan forward, and we'll come to South Cambs timetable in a minute, and it's longer than that. Thanks. Just to quickly run through, oh dear, that's not good, is it? Just to quickly run through the questions that were were asked and some of the responses. We've done some initial analysis because all the comments are online and can be looked at. So there were 3 general questions about the idea of a community stadium, would apply wherever a stadium was to go. Is there a need for a stadium? 139 people responded to that. Some of those comments actually related to Trumpington and didn't really comment on the issue of is there a need for a community stadium. So if you leave those 8 comments out, we think that 94% of people said yes, actually there is a need for a new community stadium in the Cambridge sub-region. Need and type of facility. Again, it's a quite general question. About 113 people responded to this. 80% of them said the stadium should be related to football, or describe something that was around 8 to 10 or 12,000 capacity, or mentioned the kinds of facilities that are in our proposal, and quite a number of people actually quoted the type of facility proposed by Grosvenor. The criticism, if anything, was that actually there should be more facilities, particularly a couple of people mentioning the need for Olympic and indoor facilities, so people think there should be more. And then there's a question about location, of which there seem to be 125 responses altogether. 64% of those said Trumpington. Then only 16 said not to Trumpington. And then a number of other locations were suggested. Fortunately, they're all locations that we've looked at through our process, with the exception of Waterbeach. There was a couple of people suggested the stadium should go to Waterbeach.
You got them right. What up?
Do you just want to press the button? Okay, here we go. Answers to the questions. Okay. Then the council asked 5 questions about what we've been proposing and what we've been talking about. I won't go through all of them. First one was what we were proposing. Actually, did that meet the definition of a community stadium? Would that provide what was needed? And 83% of the people who responded to that said yes, actually, what Grosvenor Rembridge is suggesting does meet with that. Again, 65% of people said that there was support. Some people said they didn't know whether there was support or not, and that was the way they read the question. The question was, is there support? And said, well, I don't know. So I think that came down to that. But 21% of people were against it because of the location. So you can see 3 times as many people were supportive as against. Sorry, next. And this is perhaps a critical question. So, is there support for the idea of actually we need some more development to pay for all of the facilities? And 80, go on, press the button. 79% said yes. There you go. Right, thank you. Next. There are some questions about locations. I think I've touched on that. Around about half of people said, actually, no, you don't need to look anymore, because actually the councils have been looking at a number of sites over 20 years, more possibly, and you know, we've been round and round the circle. We just ought to get on and do it. Just my interpretation of what they said. So 49% said there's no reason, and then lots of people suggested, ran through a number of sites. Now, of course, some people who didn't say no, some people who said you should look at some sites, actually listed more than one site, and quite a few of those people said actually you need to look at Trumpington, Cambridge East and Nyack, which is obviously something that we have done. So that's the development plan process, which is ongoing at the moment, and we've made representations, and we'd encourage you to continue to engage in that and make comments. At the same time, as people have said, we're working on towards a planning application. There's quite a lot of technical and design work has been ongoing to support that. The Cambridge Sporting Village will require something called formally environmental impact assessment, which is partly why it takes quite so long to put an application together, and we'll be writing to the councils very shortly to scope scope that work, so they will set out in detail exactly all the things we need to respond to. We envisage submitting a planning application at the same time for this site, so that can demonstrate how the whole package works together. Slightly less optimistic than Ed about timetable. I've suggested spring next year, February, March time. That's basically the end of the year. And then once it's submitted, there are sort of 3 scenarios really in terms of being able to get on site and deliver a stadium. The local authorities have been consistent. They would like the issue to be considered through their local plans, and that a planning application could be approved after that. Based on those timetables, clearly that would need to follow on from the South Cambridgeshire plan in late 2015. So we think that would be the earliest an application could be approved if it went down that route. Number of things you need to do before you can start on site, but really that means that the earliest any new facilities will be available in 2018-19. The alternative is that once an application is in, it's green belts, but national policy does allow applications to be permitted if there are very special circumstances. That's the wording in national policy. So that is what our application will seek to do, to set out what those are. We think that brings forward a stadium and all these other facilities being able to be delivered by around 2 years, possibly more. So that could lead to a decision at the end of next year, starting on site in 2014. And then the third scenario would either be that the authorities might decide to refuse any application, or the developer could appeal against non-determination, and that gets you somewhere in between. So there's then a route by which we could go to a public inquiry, and the Secretary of State would take a decision on the application. So those are the sort of timescales that we're looking at. Clearly we're keen to get on and see an application approved as soon as possible. Ed.
Thank you, Colin. And then, so really, just to conclude and draw our presentation to a close. I said in the introduction, and Colin said very clearly there, the key thing that we're looking at now is trying to get some public support, and it's very interesting to have that really positive feedback on the city's consultation. That's great, but we need a lot more, and there's an opportunity here with South Cambs. So that's number one. That's a key opportunity there. Then of course there's the opportunity to talk locally with your local councillors. If you can try and engage in those discussions, I think that would be extremely helpful. And just to speak positively about this, with a bit of a buzz in Cambridge around this now, which we feel is being generated. Just continual positive talk around it. There will be articles in the Cambridge Evening News, and BBC Radio will continue to pick up pieces on this, and it's where they are asking for responses. I think if we can just encourage everyone to respond positively. There is also a website for the project, which is cambridgesportingvillage.org.uk, and there's an info response to that, so people can write in to that. We think this is a fantastic project. It's really taking shape now. I think the way the sports is coming into it is really getting clear. We've done a lot of work which we haven't talked about tonight in terms of the economic impact of this, but we think it's incredibly positive. There's probably, in terms of construction work, there's 280 jobs just in the stadium itself. There'll be 400 odd jobs with the new housing, and those are during the construction works. And we think in terms of the sporting village, just for totally new jobs, that's assuming all the current jobs that exist around Cambridge United and the sports provision continue, there's an additional 50 new jobs that this opportunity will bring to Cambridge, which we think is going to be a really strong argument for us. In terms of just money, it's going to, the value of this project is probably going to generate an extra £2 million a year or thereabouts to the region, or to the locality. So we're very excited about this. Thank you very much for listening to that. And I think now we're going to, are we on the question slide, Andy? Oh, hello, Dave, you go?
A few words from Dave Doggett's got a little bit of piece to say before we cut him off before the Q&A.
It's okay, just
Right. Okay, thanks very much. Just firstly, I would just like to thank this team of Grosvenor and Wrenbridge for coming up with such superb plans and exciting plans, which will hopefully be the home of Cambridge United for a long time to come. The board, which is a very united board, just to put the record straight, of Cambridge United, the Youth and Community Trust, the Cambridge Fans United, and hopefully the majority of our supporters totally support the Grosvenor planning application. A vast amount has gone in my retirement, and other people on the board all working away to actually ensuring the financial sustainability of this project, not only for the club but for the trust and the sporting village. The project is privately funded and does not need public funds to make it viable. The project for Cambridge United is more than just the first team. It's about our involvement in schools, introducing children to all sports, not just football. It's our work with disabled and disadvantaged groups, and also introducing elderly people like myself to walk in football. The post-Olympics legacy is all about getting people of all ages involved in sport as part of healthy lifestyles. The government, local councils and health experts are fully behind these types of initiatives. The proposed sporting village will enable us to introduce tens of thousands of the population of Cambridge and South Cambs to become more active and healthier. It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to provide local people with a superb facility. The location, just off the M11, will mean that visitors' first impression of this area will be an iconic stadium, part of a sporting village that will complement our historical and beautiful county. So therefore, respond to the South Cambs questionnaire. Just finally, a personal observation on the required extension of the Greenbelt. I have lived in some of the most beautiful parts of England where opposition to moving the Greenbelt is totally justified. In this case, the site is bounded by the M11, the A1309 and the river. This project is not trying to expand into the Lake District, and part of it is going to be a country park. So I think we need to have the Greenbelt debate based on reality, not some fictitious line. Thanks for coming, and now you can have your questions.
Thanks, Dave.
Yeah, hi there. You touched earlier on the capacity of the stadium, being either 8, 10 or 12. Which one are you actually going for, and how big is the away end going to be?
I think we got one. I reckon you can scrap the microphone because I think it's loud enough that we can we just shout. If that's
okay,
right.
yeah, that's
good. Yeah. Which, do you want to go that one?
Yeah, total capacity is 8,000, and the away stand hasn't been set in stone, but it will be circa 2.
Right.
1,500 to 2.
I personally don't think that's big enough, but I don't know what other people think here, but you know, why go for the smaller one of 8? Why not go for 12?
Well, I mean, I'll comment just from the discussions.
We're kind of downsizing, aren't we?
No, those are bigger, but what it's critical that we build a new stadium with atmosphere, and we've been around a whole load of stadiums, and some of the most difficult to generate excitement are the oversized ones. So it's a difficult decision about that. What we've looked at is the possibility for future expansion and not discount that through flexible buildings that can be adapted. But to generate the atmosphere which clearly exists very strongly at the current ground, we think there's opportunities to really enhance that. We're getting more enclosure, but oversizing does that sort of, it works diametrically opposite that and can kill atmosphere.
I shouldn't think many people can remember the last time we were sold out at the Abbey, and that's 8,200 capacity.
We sold the away end out just the other season to Luton, didn't we?
That's 1,500, which is exactly what we're talking about here.
Well, we've got to expect that United are going to be successful in going up in the league.
That's right.
And we had 7,500 against the village.
what they're talking about is it can be expanded upwards.
Who's paying for it?
At what cost? Yeah, who's going to pay
Who's
for that?
paying for it?
Well, if we're in the championship and we've generated enough funds, and the whole financial aspect of this is to make it financially sustainable, if we got promoted, we get another 700,000 for being part of the Football League. So as you move up, you can actually generate it and do it when it's financially sustainable. The whole point is not to put this club at risk. We want to be here for another 100 years.
Oh, definitely. But if you're going to build a new stadium, why not go, well, somewhere in between, and why not go for 10? Why go for the smaller of 8 all the time?
Colchester, Shrewsbury, Chesterfield, they're all 10.
And we're going 8.
Oh, Chesterfield got 6,500 this Saturday.
Well, yeah, only just home support, won't it? That's all you're going to get, 6.
Won't you lose?
You'll have 6.
By having terracing on the north stand, it will mean it will be above 8,000 on day one. What we've said is that the whole stadium is sized to be an 8,000 capacity all-seater stadium. So by having a terracing on the north stand, it will be closer to 9.5 by having that terracing there. However, it does mean that, you know, as the club goes through the leagues, if it then gets to the championship, within 2 seasons it will need to be all-seater. That's really where we'd set the benchmark by saying the capacity is 8,000 based on an all-seater scenario. But the reality is it was slightly above that.
I was hoping for a lot more information on how we're going to get to the ground. Last meeting we were told we're going to have a great deal more detail. I don't feel I've been given any more detail other than we've still got a long walk. Can you give me 2 scenarios, say someone driving in from near Ely, how they're going to get to the ground, and someone who lives in Cambridge, how they're going to get to the ground on a weekend?
I mean, what we've been looking at since the last time I talked to you is how we max out the opportunity for parking in the park and ride area for a match day. So that's one of the things that we're looking at to see how we can accommodate car parking in there. I'm talking to the. Can you hear me? No.
Sorry. I didn't realise my voice wasn't that loud. Well, we've been, since the last time we talked to you, we've been looking at how we can increase the potential for parking in the park and ride and potentially make some use of some of that parking for a match day. So on a Saturday match, there's the opportunity exists to have some parking in that area, and that's subject to discussions with the county council in terms of how we can expand the park and ride and how we could use that. So that's one option in terms of parking there, and that's what I said on the slide there was about 400 spaces. Okay, there's some parking around the stadium itself, which would be sort of like in the same way there's parking around this stadium for official use and controlled by the club in that way, and then beyond that, as I said on the slides, we're still looking at opportunities to create further parking beyond the park and ride and routes to which those people would give access to the park and ride by walking to those parking spaces. But in addition to that, obviously we're adjacent to the transport hub of the park and ride site. So there's the busway into the city centre and there's the park and ride buses into the city centre. Part of the exercise we're going through is to look at the capacity of buses, the system by which people would pay for those buses, or those buses would be paid for. So there could be a system by which you're buying a ticket and included travel within the ticket. But all of those things are ongoing. We don't have the specific answers to give you at this point in time, but that is part of the ongoing process that we've got to look at, because we need to make sure we're managing the different levels of crowds that will be there. And it will be different from a weekday to a weekend as well. And I think when I was here before I said to you that the park and ride on a weekday will have much greater capacity simply because in the evenings it's not used in that way. The issues will be those Saturdays and how we manage the traffic on those Saturdays. So we recognise that people want to have the ability to drive there, but equally we can't just provide a sea of car parking, and we've got to recognise that there's more sustainable ways of getting to this ground, which could be by bus as well.
Yeah, I understand that. What I'd like to see, I know we've got till 2018 we might be at the new ground, but I'd like to see you run some kind of model so that if I'm driving from Ely to come to the ground, at the minute I drive in, I park and I go to the ground and that's fine. how long is it going to take me to get from your one park and ride to the ground? How much extra do you expect it to take me to get around? How hard is it going to be for people to travel? I accept that there's going to have to be a park and ride because you can't park at the ground, that's not the problem. I want to see you actually planning out how I'm going to park at Addenbrook's park and ride, how long that's going to take me to get to the ground, not how much it's going to cost, but how much my match day ticket kind of percentage that might cost, how much everything's going to cost me.
And I appreciate that. I don't have the answer for you now, but it's part of the process we're looking at. So we're looking at a variety of scenarios and where people are coming from. We've got that information, a lot of information about where the supporters live at the current time. So we're going through a process of looking at various scenarios of saying, you know, people who park here or people coming from this location. That is part of the process. I can't give you the answer right now, but it is part of the process that we will talk to you in due course about.
Can I just add from the club point of view, we're actually looking at, you were saying all that area is for club officials and all the people that run the stadium on match days. We're looking at parking them away from the site and bussing them in, which would free up another 300 spaces. So I always think there's a solution to a problem, you've just got to find it and it will pop out. But if that raises another 300 plus your 450 from the park and ride extension, you're already at 750. And if people come with at least 3 people in, they're already up at 2,200.
Yeah, I mean, it will be also about how we increase numbers of people using cars and car sharing. At the moment, I think you've got about, our surveys sort of indicate that 2.2 people share a car at the moment. So the other thing is that currently within about a mile of this site on a match day, you get about a demand for about 400 to 500 additional cars parked on the road network around here. So we've got that background information, but we are looking at that. We fully recognise what you need to know, and we will give you that information in due course, okay?
I'll have another one. Yeah. I don't understand your rationale for taking the terracing away from the away supporters. You seem to have buckled to the police saying, oh, we need to treat them differently, and in fact we need to put some seats in. There are countless grounds around the country that have terracing and some seats for away supporters.
It became one more of segregation and ensuring that home areas were maximised. So we looked at the scenario of having a south stand that was entirely terracing and the potential to have a small element of away supporters in the corner, and then because you always have to give away supporters seating as well as terracing, it would then mean you'd need to give them a portion of the east stand. By the time you then nibbled away at the east stand in terms of creating a segregation between the home and the away, and you created a further segregation between the home and away on the south stand, you start reducing your overall home capacity, and it's much harder for the authorities to control the away fans in 2 areas, both east and south. And it's not necessarily for a Telford scenario, it might be more a scenario for a Luton where there's much more away fans with much more potential flashpoints. The much more easier scenario was contain them in one stand, and if you're containing them in one stand, provide them with seating, and then you don't need to provide them with terracing. Now, you could argue that you are actually helping to reduce the atmosphere for the away supporters because you make them all sit down. But I mean that wasn't the primary goal. This was more on safety, and we have to be mindful of what the safety authorities are looking to manage this stadium. That's always at the top of our priority, and therefore we think we've come up with the best solution to deliver that.
Do you not think we're building a brand new stadium from scratch? We could design a lot of those things in. There's got to be ways. We look at Mac Town, their home end has seats in front of the terrace, so you have the terrace at the back and the seats at the front. There's lots of other grounds around the country where you've got some old rickety terrace, they've bolted some crappy seats in and they've left some terrace free. And it just, if I was an away fan going to another ground, I want to stand up when I go there, and it seems only fair that we should let them do it at our ground, and also people are going to stand up anyway, so all this idea about creating easy policing, you're going to have, for the safety certificate, have to make them sit down and create separate spots.
We did look at the scenario of creating different seating and standing within one stand, but I go back to my earlier point, you will start to lose home capacity, and for us that was more the priority than just catering for standing for away fans, so that was the decision that was reached.
I think like Luton, they restricted us to 1,100 away tickets. So this is 1,500 at the away end. So we're not actually making it a lot worse than we're, at the moment it's 1,500 in the South Stand.
No, I wasn't talking so much about capacity, I was talking more about that I feel as a football supporter you should be able to stand up at the games.
Well, they're away supporters, aren't they?
Well, I'm an away supporter this weekend at Hereford, aren't I?
Yeah, but I think
Yeah, they don't worry about you when you're there.
You would have to accept that we've got to do everything in our power to make sure this stadium is safe as it possibly can be. And because it's new build, then you have to make sure that you look at everything to carry out that responsibility.
Any other questions? Hi. Yeah, thank you.
Are we the only people which are likely to be using the stadium? So the rugby club or City have obviously got their new stadium as well. So is it just Cambridge United?
We've had a lot of discussion on that. Do you want to, Chris, want to comment on that?
The rugby club are out. They're clear they're no longer interested. Cambridge City are obviously rowing their own boat. Everyone's seen it in the Cambridge Evening News. So at the moment there's not an ongoing dialogue. I'm not going to say categorically under no circumstances will Cambridge City play at the stadium in the future. We just don't know. But there's clearly aspirations for them to have a new home elsewhere. But so that conversation's sort of slightly been put on hold, but I don't think it's been finished categorically.
Do you think that City, their plans will have any impact if they're trying for something of a reasonable size over in Salisbury?
I don't have any impact whatsoever. I mean, what we're proposing here is, this obviously is a football ground, but if you took the ground away from this, it'd still be a whole residential, commercial, leisure development in its own right. So I don't see someone building a much smaller facility purely for football in Salisbury has any impact on this whatsoever. And certainly our business planning is being worked out on the basis that this is used by one club, and other clubs come along that as a bonus, but it won't affect the business plan if it is just one club.
I was going to suggest, because we seem to have sort of slowed down on the questions, we always get, when we say that's the end, we always get lots of questions, people come up and ask us. So I think, let's take that opportunity, by all means come and ask us, and we'll have to debate around here, because that's always, every time we seem to have that, which is good, and you can all fill your glasses, and if you want to go, and if you want to stay, we'd love you to answer more questions. So I'll draw that to a close if that's all right with you, and say thank you very much, and we will be speaking again soon. Thank you.